Go ahead and give a little introduction. From the pulpit to the classroom to the courtroom, Don has spent his life exploring how we live together in community. A former minister and a current third-year law student, Don's educational path weaves together philosophy, political science, religion, and law. Disciplines that ask the big questions about how we live, what we value, and how we navigate life together. Don?
Don, is your mic on?
Say that again?
Is your mic on?
Remind me.
There's a button on the back. A little green light will come on. Hold it. Okay.
Appeared to be on.
All right.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Don.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Great.
I said if I wasn't here, I'd be doing homework. So, I'm glad to be here. Get a break from homework. So, sometimes I'm not really sure where to start. Part of the conversation, good, I'm glad to know that starts automatically, good. Okay, so part of the conversation that I wanted to have centers around this idea of what's happening in the world right now, and in particular, are we having a constitutional crisis? I'm sure everybody here has heard that question raised. And I'm just really curious what you think. If you were going to answer that question right now, how would you answer it?
If you count a coup as a constitutional crisis, then yes, we're in the middle.
I'm going to take John's vote as a yes. Does anyone dare disagree with John? By the way, I do.
I agree with John.
I think the biases of the Supreme Court is a very frightening constitutional crisis.
Biases of the Supreme Court.
Well, biases is the right word, but
I spell coup.
Like that, the-
I'm no lawyer, but I keep hearing it from people who seem to be lawyers that we are in a constitutional crisis.
Interesting.
But let's say a few years down the road we get out of this and everybody in here would agree we're not in one anymore. Would that mean that this time was still one, or would that mean we had avoided one?
Oh, that's interesting. So how do you define constitutional crisis?
Right.
How do you define constitutional crisis? How would you define it?
Well, if the rule of law is not being followed, which it certainly is not a lot of times right now. But, you know, I'm sorry, until the point that we stop having, free and fair elections.
Well, free and fair elections are one category of rules.
Right, that's one part of
Right.
it. Probably one of the biggest ones.
Gotcha. Yeah, sure. Karen? Go ahead, Karen.
What's scary to me is that it seems like the checks and balances put in place by the Constitution are not working for the people.
see, that's why we're Karens, because I was gonna say the exact same thing. I was gonna say yes,
Were you
because
really gonna
checks
say
and,
the same thing?
yes, because checks and balances have essentially disappeared, and that's a main tenet of our Constitution that has gone the way of the over.
Rich, I know you have an opinion.
Lots of them, I would like to rip them out. But, I know you got that case coming up, but the, Supreme Court is kind of letting itself go. It's the highest lawmaker, I guess, or law. And, the Supreme Court is doing what 2025 wanted it to do.
Yep.
And that is to reduce the, power of the judiciary. So, Fran, Karen talked about the, well, I forget what you said.
Checks and balances.
Yeah, checks and balances, so that is, it's going south.
Yeah. Thoughts?
I don't know anything about law other than all these terms you're throwing out, so it seems to me that it's always sucked and that
So would that be a yes or no?
I don't even know why we're asking if they're constitutional crisis now. To me, I mean, this crap went on. Oh, I'm sorry. Watch my mouth.
Why?
We're all adults here.
You were
It's
all
okay.
similar,
It's okay. Speak your mind.
yeah,
Speak my mind.
please.
I
Frankly.
think that our government and I mean, they allowed this to go on and it's wrong. It was wrong then. And there's been all sorts of things since the beginning that were always wrong. So why is it now all of a sudden a terrible thing when it's been terrible all along, to me?
So you would say no, that we're not in a constitutional crisis?
To me, I don't know, well, I don't know.
In other words, has the rule of law stopped functioning?
I don't think it ever did to some degree.
It depends on who you are.
So we're gonna put
It
some
depends on
space.
who you are.
One of my favorite things
No
is the
ritual.
space between the yes and the no.
The gray area.
To me, it's irrelevant because it's always been wrong to some degree.
Gotcha,
So,
gotcha.
I'll be the devil's advocate and say it's not a constitutional crisis, but the situation shows the imperfections of our form of government, the imperfections of democracy, and for so many years, Republicans warned and complained that the office of the president was too powerful, and now that office is even more powerful. It's obviously too much power concentrated in the office of the president, and we're suffering the consequences of that. And we need a plan to fix that.
So you agree with this checks and balances concern, at least? You said we need to fix it and that it seems to be disproportionate right now? Am I?
Right.
Okay.
What's that old saying? Democracy is the worst form of government except for
Except
all the
all
others.
the others? Yeah. Love it. Okay. If y'all will be patient with me, this is my attempt. If y'all will be patient with me, allow me to present an argument, and then let's talk about it. Okay? So allow me to present something first, and then we can have discussion about it, so that way we can get through it, because I have so much that I want to sort of lay on the table. But I get the sense that the room, by majority, would say that we are at a time where the rule of law is not particularly being followed. There are imbalances between the checks and balances, and that if there is a such thing as a constitutional crisis, we may be in one right now. So, I wanted to talk about the 13th and 14th Amendment. I wanted to talk about the 14th Amendment. And then I realized I can't really do that until I talk about the 13th Amendment. And I want to do that with this question in mind. Because, the reason I want to do that is because when I hear Project 2025, now I want you to understand, I believe the Heritage Foundation and others behind Project 25 couldn't be more pleased with the present outcome. But that is not to say that they've been pulling the strings. So there's two different questions in my mind. Number one is, would the drafters of Project 2025 approve? And number two is there a conspiracy theory? And so I'm trying to parse those two things with conversations like this, okay? Are they pleased versus are they in control? And so part of what I'm trying to do today, if not all of what I'm trying to do today, is have a conversation that provides, Laura and I were talking about this on the way up. The higher you go in education, the more you take a thin slice. So one of the pastors that I worked with gave a sermon one time, and one of the things she talked about was the dietary the dietary relevance of the Apostle Paul. Oh, you know what? It wasn't Paul. That's why. It was John the Baptist. The dietary relevance of John the Baptist. Now, you might think this is a thin slice, and it most certainly is. But somebody went and got their whole PhD around this thesis. All they really studied for their PhD was all the dietary stuff and trying to fit all this stuff together. In other words, the more educated you are, it seems, the more of a thin slice you take of things. So it used to be that philosophers would have these grand theories of everything. And then at least since the 20th century, at least since Heidegger, that doesn't exist anymore. People take little thin slices from their own bias, their own perspective. This is really important. What I'm trying to say is that the more educated, that the way our society understands being more educated about something means being able to divide categories, to separate out, to take thinner slices. So, conspiracy theories are often based in this concept that there's a mastermind in control. I have often said that I believe God is the biggest conspiracy theory of all. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not actually making commentary on whether or not God exists or not. I'm making commentary on how people understand the concept of God. And they, instead of trying to understand things in smaller bits and piecing together the intricacies of that and understanding how one influences the other, they have a grand master narrative. God's in control. So the more educated you become, the more thin slices you take of this. And I'll just give a really quick example. When I was at a church, my first church that I was called to, the church would not allow gay marriage. And I mean, it was in their constitution. And I told them, I cannot be your minister here if this stays here. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to have a conversation about this. We're going to change it. So a lot of people wouldn't come to hear me. It divided the church. But their basis was biblical marriage. Right? I mean, in other words, that's the way God wanted it. So I had to go through and explain which biblical marriage. Right? Because if you start with the Hebrew Bible, biblical marriage looked different throughout. So you could have multiple wives. I mean, I gotta agree. I think that's a great idea. They did not appreciate my sense of humor most of the time. Of course, with Paul, you have the husband of but one wife. But in other situations, you have multiple wives with concubines. I'm not going to try to spell that word, so I'll just put
See.
So, marriage and family dynamics in the Bible cannot be narrowed down into one concept. That's 66 books, written over 1,000 years, by different people in different places. And there's lots of thin slices that you have to take to have an intelligent, informed conversation about what is biblical marriage. And that's what I'm trying to point to. That's my example for what I'm trying to point to today. A lot of folks, I think, live here. And I'm trying to suggest, with my thesis today, that while I think the people who wrote this would be very pleased with what's going on, there's a difference between saying that and there's another way of looking at this. And today I want to take the other way of looking at this for a moment, and then we can discuss it. Are we all on the same page? Okay. So I thought I would start with the 13th Amendment. Because what is the 13th Amendment? What did it do? What were we all taught the 13th Amendment did?
Abolish slavery.
Abolished slavery. I'm filtering right now because you were lied to. And I was lied to.
Yeah.
And everybody in here who thinks the 13th Amendment abolished slavery was lied to. It did not. Let me just say that before the 13th Amendment, there was, in the Constitution, there was an attempt to take both sides of an argument and compromise. They didn't want to deal with the issue of slavery. So the Constitution doesn't. They have something called the 3/5 compromise. Right? It's a compromise. They're not going to make a decision because that's going to divide people. And so then later they come up with the Missouri Compromise. I didn't spell that right. The Missouri Compromise. In other words, okay, Missouri, you can come in as a slave state, and Maine will be a free state. Because we have to keep that balance in Congress between slave and free, or else we'll all get run over. There was the Slave Fugitive Act. This is another compromise piece of legislation that says if slaves run away to your state, you're obligated to send them back. Okay? There's this whole history in America of refusing to take a position on slavery. And then we get the 13th Amendment. And in the 13th Amendment, we take a position on slavery for the first time, except for the Emancipation Proclamation, a wartime proclamation. And here's what it says. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except we finally took a position. Except as punishment. Now, if your blood's starting to boil, you are in the right place. For crime. Now, what happened? What happened is, this is was part one of my thesis today. What happened is, slavery was moved from, how did I put this yesterday in my mind? Slavery was moved from buying, I hate it when that happens.
Purchasing human
Yeah,
life?
that's it.
Purchasing human life?
Slavery moved from a
Purchase, right?
purchase system to what I call judicial, when you look over something. Review, not review, judicial.
Oversight.
Thank you, to judicial oversight. In other words, the 13th Amendment finally took a position on slavery, and what it said is slavery will become the wheelhouse of the judiciary. We will control it. So that ends the kind of slavery that you see. That's not working. I mean, no, I didn't want to change it. I'm just trying to get the light to work. That ended the kind of slavery where you have ownership, property, ownership. That's what I was trying to think of. Purchase property. That's gone. You cannot buy or sell a human being again in America legally. However, what it did instead is it turned it over to the judicial system. Now, there was a case called the slaughterhouse cases. And what happened is, one of the states decided, we're making such a mess here. With all these, there's butchers everywhere, and they're making messes, slaughtering animals here and there and everything. So we're going to create one centralized slaughterhouse. This might have been Tennessee.
Yeah, Louisiana.
Was it Louisiana? Thank you. That doesn't surprise me. Did you say that out loud? I'm sorry, everybody from Louisiana. I was born in Mississippi, so.
Lots of boyettes in Louisiana.
So, one centralized slaughterhouse. Now, this is where the 14th Amendment starts. This is like the late 1800s, and they come in and they say, our 14th Amendment right to, let me read that to me. It's privileges and immunities, or privileges or immunities.
All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
So they sued, and anytime you sue, I mean, you have to have a law that you base your suit on. There has to be some rule that you base it on. So they based the suit on the privileges and immunities of the 14th Amendment. And they said, you can't take away our ability to make a living. You know, this is what we do to feed our families. This is part of the privileges that we get for citizenship. Remember what the 14th Amendment was created for, by the way. Anybody, does everybody already know that?
Why don't you remind us?
The 14th Amendment was created because,
Well, it was to make the black citizens, right?
that's it. It was to make the former slaves citizens
To increase the population, to increase their power.
and to give rights. I mean, there was the Freedmen's Bureau. There was an honest effort by the federal government to do Reconstruction, to create a Freedmen's Bureau, to give rights to former slaves. This case has nothing to do with that, and yet has everything to do with that. So, the Supreme Court said, and here's why, slaughterhouse people, aggrieved people, the 14th Amendment is only for the federal government. It doesn't tell the states what to do. I mean, I realize when you read it, it says no state shall. But that did not stop the Supreme Court. And by the way, the writers of the 14th Amendment wrote in opposition to this, saying, you're wrong, Supreme Court, we did intend. The Supreme Court didn't care. This is right after the 14th Amendment came down the pike. So what happens with the 14th Amendment? They stripped any conditions on states. So the states started making something called vagrancy laws. I just want to be really clear what I'm trying to get at here. We have this myth of America. The 13th Amendment did what?
Abolish slavery.
Bullshit. The 13th Amendment did what?
Move slavery from private property to judicial property.
That's right.
Now run by private prisons.
Judicial regulation. That's the word I was looking for. It turned slavery into a judicially regulated enterprise. And then the 14th Amendment was supposed to give a bunch of rights, and instead what it said was, well, we can only enforce federal rights. We can't enforce states' rights. States are autonomous. They can do whatever they want. So what did the states do? They did what they wanted. They created vagrancy laws. Laura and I sat and read a few of them together yesterday, and Laura, what's the primary thing that makes a vagrancy law a vagrancy law? What's like the one thing that was in common to all of them? What makes you a vagrant?
You don't have any source of income.
No job. From the 1880s to the 1920s, the 14th Amendment was stripped of its power to protect the people it was supposed to protect. Now, who didn't have jobs?
Freed slaves.
Former slaves.
So, what did they do to them? They arrested them and they began something called convict leasing. I shit you not. Convict leasing. Now, thanks to this right here, so here's your ability to turn a prisoner into a slave, like literal slave, and then here now is your ability to lease that person out for money. So the state gets paid, the private enterprise doesn't have to pay for housing, doesn't have to pay for anything. And for 40 years after the 14th Amendment, this is how it operated in America. Convict leasing.
We're still doing it.
We're getting there. And then, in the 1920s, Tabbert. Martin Tabbert, 1921, was on the train and didn't have a ticket, so they arrested Martin. Now, Martin had a family, and they sent money. But of course, the money got lost. You never received your money. And they sent Martin to a plantation. And Martin thought, I'm not working for you. And they beat Martin, and they beat Martin, and they beat Martin until they killed Martin. And it caused a huge outcry. Now, why would it cause a huge outcry? That's Martin.
Because he was white.
Because he was white.
Yep.
Yep.
That's all right.
For 40 years, this system is how things ran in America until Martin Tabbert. I put up one of the statutes. This was active until the 2000s, in like 2017, I think, in Mississippi. It's a vagrancy law. All persons able to work, having no property to support them, who have no visible or known means of a fair, honest, and reputable livelihood. This is the definition of a vagrant. Persons leading an idle, immoral, or profligate life, who have no property to support them, and who are able to work and do not. Who are vagrants? People without a job. So, see the company list up there? Keep those in mind. It's Walmart. It's just about every large company. Okay, because we're going to come back to that. So, as recently as 1970s, these vagrancy laws were being challenged. And in this instance, the Koch brothers owned a chicken manufacturing plant. And in a chicken, y'all know who the Koch brothers are?
Yeah.
The Koch brothers are one of the richest families ever. They had their hands in just about everything. And they were doing they owned a chicken processing plant business. And in that plant, there's a kill station. And in the kill station, Frank Dwayne Ellington got caught in the machine. And it killed him. He's working under essentially convict leasing program, and he gets caught in the machine and it kills him. Do you know what the Koch brothers' defense was?
He's a vagrant?
He's a vagrant?
He's not our employee.
Oh,
He's not our employee. We didn't hire him. This is contract labor. This is 1970s, Koch brothers. Okay? Now, clearly this becomes less and less popular, and this convict leasing program begins to lose favor. It almost doesn't exist anywhere anymore. And instead, it has turned into what's called work release programs. And today, we don't have convict leasing, we have work release programs. This is completely different. You can tell by the images of it. Right? It couldn't be further from what's been happening in the past. You can tell from the images. Work programs are dictated by judges who allow a convict to work in them. It's still regulated by the judicial branch. And I put this little thing down here because I wanted you to see that this is controlled by state law. In some states, like Tennessee, it's mandatory to pay your workers 17 to 75 cents per hour, somewhere in there. And in Utah, 40 cents per hour minimum. In the alphabet, who exists between Tennessee and Utah? Texas. Jobs are unpaid. This is a report from the program itself. This is not a biased report. This report comes down from the program itself, though the work release program itself. Texas does not pay. Anytime money would come in, they take it and pay room and board and things of that nature. So they confiscate all the money. But it's okay because it's work release, so it's very different. I mean, it's not like they're there involuntarily. You have to volunteer for it. There's one small problem with that theory. Back up a step. They're in prison. It's involuntary. And it's unpaid. And it's the work release program. And corporations are still using it. Yeah. I was going to say let me get through stuff, but go ahead, Eric.
I just wondered, are they considered company employees at this point?
They are not considered company employees. And that Coke case did not culminate. They think it culminated. There's no record, which tells you it probably ended in a settlement with the family. Although OSHA fined them. And that fine was like $1,500. Koch brothers are worth billions and billions of dollars, and OSHA fined them, I don't know, a couple $1,000. She says she was in the program for 20 some odd years. And what she said is that she was paid with toilet paper and tampons weekly. So there is payment apparently. So what I'm trying to create here is this nice little Venn diagram of unfree exploited labor based in the 13th and 14th Amendment that still exists today. And it started out as chattel slavery. It went to convict leasing, and today it's called work release. Okay, so that's sort of my 13th Amendment sort of, what the heck is the 13th Amendment moment? And then the next thing is the 14th Amendment. And I'm getting really close to being done here. The 14th Amendment, as you can see, got stripped of its power. And there was a civil rights bill. In my office at home, I have 4 boards. Can you see why? So,
There's some white space in the middle.
that's right. Thank you. The civil rights cases are a group of cases based on the Civil Rights Act. Civil Rights Act of 1860 something, I think. Forgive me for not remembering the exact date. And this has to do with businesses turning away people of color. So one of the cases, the courts will group a bunch of cases together that have similar issues and then rule on all of them. So that's why they're called civil rights cases. That's why it's called slaughterhouse cases. The court's reviewing all of them at once, essentially. And the civil rights cases are cases in which companies, private companies, restaurants are being sued because a black person can't eat there. And the court says, just like they said over here about it doesn't apply to the states, it does not apply to individuals. To private individuals, okay? That includes companies. You can refuse anybody you want as a private individual. This is before, obviously, later developments. What I'm trying to say is this is how we interpreted for most of the 20th century. I mean, this is what we grew up with. This is what was happening. As we were being taught the 13th Amendment freed the slaves, yay, America. This is what was actually happening in the world. Okay? So, 14th Amendment, we've already said, has been gutted. Has been gutted. Right? The 14th Amendment, this idea that we all have the equal protection of the laws, has been gutted. And one of the things I wanted to suggest today is that one day you have rights and the next day you don't. And that is America. One day you have rights, the next day you don't. So in the 1940s, the president, FDR, we were recently attacked by Pearl Harbor, issued Executive Order 6099, I think. And basically what it said is, I grant the authority of the military to create military areas. That was the language in it, military areas. Think of it as military districts. So they did. The military created the West Coast, for instance. And I use that example, like the West Coast, as a military district. And anybody, they also said, anybody of Japanese descent, this is really important, can't stay, but they can't leave either. This is what the order basically said. You cannot stay, but to leave you must get approval. So everyone report to what's been called the assembly area or assembly facility. It's a euphemism for what?
Concentration camp.
A concentration camp, a detention center. Okay? George Takei was a little kid. Sulu from Star Trek was a little kid at the time, and he wrote a book about his experience.
Parents got me up very early one morning, and they dressed us hurriedly. My parents told us, my brother and me, to wait in the living room while they did some last-minute packing back in the bedroom. And so we were standing by the front window. Suddenly we saw two soldiers marching up our driveway, carrying rifles with shiny bayonets on them. They stomped up the porch and with their fists began pounding on the door. It was a horrific, terrifying sound that seemed to just tremble, resonate throughout the house. My father came out and answered the door. At gunpoint, we were ordered out of our home. My father gave my brother and me little packages to carry. He hefted two heavy suitcases, and we followed him out onto the driveway and stood there waiting for our mother to come out. When she finally came out, she had our baby sister in one arm and a heavy duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. It was a terrifying morning that I will never forget.
So Takei wrote the book, and you can see they posted signs, instructions to all Japanese ancestry individuals, and they've told them where to go and what to do. And this is Korematsu. Korematsu was like 21, 22, he was just a young kid. He had a girlfriend, he didn't want to go. He loved America. And by the way, these are the horse stables. You wanted to be in a horse stable, that wasn't yours. These are the horse stables they converted. And you can see the conversion job, where if you were of Japanese descent, this is where you lived, en masse with others. You know, assembly centers. And then Korematsu was arrested, he was captured, he was arrested. The Supreme Court heard his case and he was found guilty. Because, why? Because in order for, the court had already made a decision in a case called Youngstown Sheet and Tube. This is how our government works, this is how the judiciary works. And what they had decided is that when the president acts, and the president's all by himself, it's weak. And it's very subject to being dismantled by the court. So for instance, Truman tried to take over the steel industry because they were threatening a labor strike and we were in the midst of a Korean War. And the court said you can't do that. That's outside of your executive authority. However, when FDR did this, Congress passed a law called Public Law 503. And Public Law 503 basically said, if you do not follow the military's rules based on this executive order, it's a crime. So now you have the executive and you have Congress. And the judiciary said that's sort of the test. That when Congress is backing up the executive and they're working in concert, that sort of thing is going to pass. That's going to fly. Does that make sense? So FDR's, in America, FDR's concentration camps for the Japanese got judicial approval because it met the test of Youngstown Sheet 2. Okay. This is Korematsu right here. That's his family. And I'm trying to lead up to this concept that this is America. This isn't a break in our history. To do these sorts of things that we're doing today, we just have to reach back into history and try to pull some of that with us. I'm going to say that again. It doesn't require a big disruption. Only if you are holding on to the myth of America. Can you imagine that what's happening right now is new, is unprecedented? No, it's not. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the beginning of the Civil War. Habeas corpus is a rule that says if you're arrested, you have a right to go before a judge. They can't just hold you forever. You have a right, a habeas corpus right to go before a judge. And Lincoln said, I'm suspending that. And the court came back and told him, no, you're not. Congress is the only person who can suspend it. And Lincoln said, watch me. And he suspended it. FDR threatened to pack the court because they were voting against his policies for this New Deal. He said he's going to push legislation through Congress that for every justice that is 70 and a half or older, we can add a new justice to the court. And the reason is because we want stability. So he was trying to bully. And then, so you have these instances. Of course, everybody knows about Andrew Jackson, right? That was a land grab. The court told him specifically, you cannot take that land. And he said, what army are you going to stop me with? So throughout American history, you have there's something called a unitary executive theory. I'm writing a paper on this for one of my classes. For my admin class. And this is just, so every now and again we come across the executives and they are really trying to push the boundaries of what an executive is allowed to do. I'm getting to the conclusion. Every now and again, you come across a president who believes in the unitary executive theory. I have my own power, I can do what I want. I was elected in by the people and you can't stop me. That's beyond your power. You also have a spectrum on the court from progressives who believe that the Constitution is a living document that's supposed to change as we all grow and new technologies emerge. But you also have originalists. They have a particular judicial philosophy of originalism. In other words, this is not what the Founding Fathers intended. So when we read Trump v. Casa, this is the case that, this was the 14th Amendment case where Trump was going to suspend the 14th Amendment. Okay, he lost at the lower court, and they appealed, but they didn't appeal the 14th Amendment question. Instead, they took out a question, a little thin slice of that case, and they said, these lower courts don't have the right to do these nationwide injunctions. It's beyond the scope of their power. Well, the court is mostly made up of originalists, of traditionalists right now. So they went back to the Constitution, they went back to the laws that sort of define the boundaries of the court, and they said, well, you're right. And then they wrote a whole opinion about how this was really invented in the mid-20th century. This court's ability, this lower court's ability to do, and they aren't wrong. It's like, didn't happen before then. The opinion is very sound, very grounded. It's just grounded in an originalist, traditionalist judicial philosophy. So, 5 pregnant women filed suit and said, we're going to have babies and they're supposed to be American citizens and we have standing. In other words, we are the ones that are going to be injured by this. And so it went all the way up to the Supreme Court said, lower court, you can't give an injunction, you can only give a remedy to the 5 women. You have to limit your remedy to the people that have actually sued and that are injured. Therefore, if you want an injunction, does anybody know what they said you have to do?
Certify a class.
You have to certify, you have this class action lawsuit. So the very next day, Barbara versus Trump, a class action lawsuit. Okay? In other words, the ACLU and others said, fine, you want us to go through this process, we'll go through this process instead. It slowed things down, believe me, it didn't stop it. These guys, the ACLU and others, they are at the front lines. So my theory is that we are not in a constitutional crisis, but there is a constellation of a really adamant executive who's really pushing the boundaries and couldn't care less. And then we have a court. I mean, Laura and I were talking about this. Bush appointed 3, Obama 1, right? Trump 3, Biden 1, and now we have this court that's 6 conservative, 3 liberal. And many of the conservatives are originalists. So here's the nail in the coffin for the conspiracy theory in my mind. Unless the Project 2025 people killed those justices while Bush was president, then they weren't pulling the strings. Those justices died when there was a conservative president and a conservative Senate, and then a conservative justice, Thomas, for one, was put in while Bush was president. That's not Project 2025, though I'm certain they are wetting their pants. They're so happy. But it doesn't mean that they were in control. So is the rule of law happening? Now that we've looked at the rule of law, are there checks and balances?
Well, it kind of seems to me that this is a slow-moving constitutional crisis that's been in progress for, a couple hundred years.
since the 3/5 compromise? Yeah.
The puppet masters don't pull strings in secret like you were talking about. Instead, they change public opinion. I was just thinking, in a normal world, American citizens would be in favor of having an OSHA, a Consumer Protection Agency, unions, organizations that can help the individual who has a grievance against a huge corporation or something. But today, conservatives have become so fiercely against consumer protection, unions, OSHA, things like that.
It's interesting, the conservative court, I'm not saying you're wrong. I would add on top of that the conservative court is not saying that what Trump is doing is okay. And they write that in their opinion. This is no way an endorsement. What they say is that it's not their job to check the president, to check the executive. It's their job to do what was defined in Marbury versus Madison, which is to say what the law is. It's their job, again, they're originalists. It's not their job to push back on everything that is ideologically wrong with Trump. Their job is to do what the judiciary's job is, which is to say what is law and what is not law. So they're really narrowing the scope of their function, just like they did in Marbury versus Madison. Y'all know that case at all? It's fascinating because it applies completely. Marbury, I don't remember the guy's name. Okay, so I think it was President Adams was leaving office, and he did a bunch of midnight judicial appointments when Jefferson was supposed to come in immediately following. Think about that. He did a bunch of judicial packing appointments. I want my people in those positions. This is at the beginning of the country, guys. This isn't now. This isn't FDR. This is at the very beginning of the country. So I'm going to write all these letters appointing all these people. Well, the problem is they had to be signed, and Marbury was the person who had to sign them. And the new president, Jefferson, said don't sign them. So Marbury was supposed to be appointed, and he sued Madison, who was supposed to sign them. And the court said, we don't have any power to do that. So they said, they circumscribed their power. It's not within our authority to tell the executive that he has to sign these documents. In other words, to have that authority, it'd have to be in the Constitution, or Congress would have to make a law. So mostly what the judiciary is saying is, number one, we don't have that authority in the Constitution, and number two, that's Congress's job, not ours. To make laws, Congress's job, not ours. So you just have this judiciary of originalists who are really purposely shrinking the scope, narrowing the scope of their power, while at the same time and moment, you have somebody like Trump who's like really trying to press. I can do whatever I want. I'm the president of the United States and have the support of the people. Can we take a moment to wonder? What questions, not what answers. We are answers people, I know. What questions does this raise for you? Kim?
So the question that I have goes back to Project 2025 then. So if they're not the puppet masters, they must clearly understand this history, right?
Who's they?
The people, the Heritage Foundation and those who have put this together. I would think that they would fully understand where this is, what the trajectory of this, which is why Project 2025 exists.
Yes.
Because they fully understand it.
Yes.
So these are not stupid people.
No.
These are brilliant people, and I know that's triggering, but these are brilliant people, right?
People.
Who have really, really dug into where this can go. And this is the plan to get us there. My question is, what exactly is going to be the end game? And the reason why I say that is because, so if you're like me and you believe that corporate America is going to eventually run out of people to sell stuff to, because at least in this country, because we're all going to be freaking broke, you know. And so, who are their customers? Like, it's going to eat itself. Wouldn't you think that it was going to eventually eat itself? The house of cards has got to eventually fall.
My personal thought is that fine, if democracy isn't serving our purposes anymore, then screw democracy. I don't mean that's my opinion. I mean, I believe that is the opinion of many people in power. That democracy is a great narrative. Democracy is the best form of government, or the worst form of government, next to all other forms of government. But the moment that it begins to stop serving my purposes, the moment it begins to put my family in danger, the moment it begins to make me risk poverty, then maybe democracy, I mean, you've heard supporters say, maybe we need a good, strong king. So I just think that there are people who believe democracy is great unless it's not going to work for us, and then we've got to think of something else.
I think that the 2025 people will realize that it is very easy to motivate a substantial portion of the populace by hating the right people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just this country.
Correct. It's people.
But
it's tribalism.
yes,
It's human nature.
using tribalism to say, you know, I'm right because these people, we don't like them for whatever reason. I mean, they do it to brown people who are gay.
That's interesting. Yeah. One of the things I've been trying to point out over the last few times that we've gotten together is that there's conclusory thinking. Y'all remember that conversation? Please do. Conclusory thinking is I came up with the answer, but I can't tell you all. I can't show you the evidence. You start with the conclusion. I don't really have the evidence.
Yeah.
That's conclusory thinking. What I'm trying to do is show you the evidence. So what I'm trying to do is not conclusory thinking. I'm trying to show you step by step who your country is, who they've been from the beginning, and why right now is not a particularly special moment. It's significant. It's important. People are being hurt. There's an urgency to what's happening. I'm not trying to take away from any of that. What I'm trying to say is the moment right now is not unique in American history in many ways. But what I want us to avoid, what I want us to learn to avoid as a group is this. Because anybody can state a conclusory opinion. The problem is there's no value in it, except to mark yourself among the tribe. This is all Biden's fault anyway, isn't it? I mean, think about it. Isn't every bit of this Biden's fault? If he would have had stronger policies, we wouldn't be in this mess. Think about all the people who are being killed by these people, by these illegal aliens.
What I want to do is find a way to combat the use of tribalism to sway public opinion, even against your own interest.
So,
I mean, like,
first thing to do is to recognize what it is. It's conclusory thinking for tribalistic purposes. Because if you go against the tribe, they're going to kick you out.
so how do you fight that?
I think you have to fight that. I'll tell you my own personal opinion. That's a great wondering question. I do not have the answer, or else I would have done it. I'll tell you what I think you have to do, and that is you have to get back to grassroots organizing. And you know, Project 2025 didn't start in 2025. It started with Reagan. This is what, a 40 years long program? We have to play the long game. That means this room ought to be so goddamn packed that we can't get them through the door. But most of us right now are just here because we enjoy the stimulating conversation.
And the lecture.
Maybe.
I come for the coffee.
Screw the conversation. Yeah, Karen.
I don't know how to word my question. It's, okay, so if FDR, when he had the right to turn the military against Japanese people, so that's basically exactly what Trump is doing against brown people right now.
Agreed. Agreed. Executive order
Right.
and arrest of people.
Incarceration.
Incarceration. And then what happens when they're incarcerated? What happens when they're convicted?
We send them to South Sudan.
So yes, keep going.
So how do we turn it around? Is it, I mean, what scares me is what else Trump will use the military for. I mean, is this just the beginning of how he's gonna use the military, or is he gonna start? I mean, my husband and I have talked about, you know, he's very vocal about how much he hates Democrats and what he wants to do to Democrats. Well, we're Democrats. We live on a corner of a street in Burleson where all of our neighbors are MAGA. Our neighbor across the street has about 10 different flags that he flies every day with different MAGA messages. So is
I
it
live in
gonna-
El Dorado. I know exactly how you feel.
So, when Trump starts persecuting Democrats, are our neighbors gonna report us and they're gonna come to our door like they did Mr. Talkies? I mean, how do we stop that from happening? If
Yeah,
we don't have-
so-
That's a real fear.
That is a real fear. That's
A lot of people have been
absolutely a
saying
real
that.
fear, yes.
And they're afraid of all the smartphones are listening to us right now.
Yeah.
And there's a list of how you voted, and they can easily just disappear, you know? I mean, it's not hysterical to think that way, because we've seen this show before, like.
One day you have rights, and one day you don't have
1930s
rights.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago, you know, I could get an abortion, and today, I guess I can't. You know, your rights just disappear. 'Cause one
Well,
day someone
but that's not
voted.
what happened. I mean, just to push back a little bit, you can't do it in Texas, correct? And so that leaves poor people out unless they have some back channel. So yes, it has definitely moved it to estates. I mean, again, it's the originals, right? They pushed it back to a state level. And I think the question, as legitimate as it is, it's based in fear.
Yeah.
It's based in fear of like the worst possible outcome. And I mean, I don't know how to answer. I don't know how to answer what could happen hypothetically.
Yeah, I think the way we push back against tribalism is we have to like talk to our neighbor who's flying the MAGA flags. And because once we meet them as a person and get to know them, they're not gonna be that horrible Democrat hating monster that we've imagined they are. And likewise, they're gonna meet us and they're gonna say, oh, well, they don't really eat babies and celebrated abortions,
I admire your optimism.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's how we have to do it.
I think if I can name this out loud, there's a white, male, heterosexual perspective that maybe doesn't feel the urgency. The only reason I'm saying this is because I was taught this when I was at Brown. In similar situations where we were having conversations, and I had to be told, there's a white, hetero, male, able-bodied, normative mindset where you don't feel the sense of urgency because your family's not being threatened. So I'm not saying no, and I have lots of MAGA friends. And by lots, I have like 2 friends in my life, so one of them's MAGA.
50%.
And whole 50% of my friends voted for Trump. So I am willing to, my whole family, everybody but me and my family is a Trump supporter and voted for Trump. So I am willing to stay engaged and stay in the conversation. But I wouldn't want to say that that is the answer, because I feel like for many people, there's so many folks who have a different sense of urgency of risk.
I wanted to say an idea that I got from the Timothy Snyder book that has
On tyranny?
Yeah, on tyranny. And I did this only out of our own protection, being 2 doors down with the flagpole man.
Yeah.
With different scary flags. I deliberately, and I'm patting myself on the back too, I deliberately gave them an old edger that I had. And I did that.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy, but
No,
I
it
did it specifically to try to make friends with them, since we have BLM, Black Lives Matter, and all of our Democratic signs up, and that was really not so much as to bridge anything as to try to make friends in case, and because I think that is going to happen. And that's paranoid. I don't think I'm paranoid. I think it's realist.
I still have my Harris magnets on my car because when I pull in someplace as an older white lady getting out of an SUV, I don't want anyone to look at me and think I might possibly be a MAGA person.
Yeah, one of the important pieces is that the Roe case that you're talking about is connected to a judicial thought process that connects many other things, like gay marriage. So there's a scaffolding built on that train of thought and law, in which your point should not be dismissed.
Oh, no.
I hope it didn't appear that way.
No, not at all.
Because we could very easily find ourselves in a place where Alberta fell overturned, for instance. So I didn't mean to take away from that if it seemed that way.
Well, has money always been in power? I mean, if we go back to when we became a nation, who was in power?
White males that were
Well,
landowning.
and it doesn't matter when it happened, that's where the power is. And power will find a way to get what it wants. So everything we're doing here in this country, we're just doing what's been done since we became a nation. It's just the methods may have changed, but the results are all the same.
Yeah. So come to Alvarado, Karen. Karen.
Oh.
The answer to your question is you have to come to Alvarado. So we have some acreage out there. We have eggs and chickens. And we have a big garden. We have enough potatoes for you. So when your neighbors turn on you, just come to my house.
Okay.
Now, I mean that sort of half seriously. Note that I think that the biggest protection we have as community is each other. So I'm not saying that facetiously, I mean that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, you know, we've always been friends with our neighbors.
Yeah.
We're friends with our neighbors. I mean, we've always gotten along fine, but now there seems to be a divide. There's
Yeah.
definitely a divide.
Well, and that's because the Project 2025 people are so much better organized than we are. They're so much better organized, they're really well funded, they've been working really hard.
Democrats are herding cats, I mean, come on,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah,
Like
you're terrible at it.
excellent point, yeah. So I don't know that it's conspiracy theory in as much as it is they're just better organizers. They're incredibly smart, they're taking advantage of opportunities and understanding those thin slices and being able to see how they interplay, like a really strong executive and a really originalist judiciary. Those things really help explain what's happening a whole lot more and help us anticipate a whole lot more than a conspiracy theory. And that's, I just wanted to present that today.
So, we can continue the conversation if you'd like, over snacks after assembly. I want to honor your time.